It happened the day I got the call that was never supposed to come to me. I was 17, exhausted from my AP chemistry exam, and the hallway smelled like floor polish and old ambition. The sunlight was sharp as I stepped outside, and then my phone buzzed. A calm voice said, "Congratulations, Ela Whitmore. You've been accepted into Stanford's Summer Research Fellowship. Expect your full packet by mail next week." I stopped walking. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just stood there in the parking lot, heart thudding like a quiet drum. I had applied in secret late one night on the school library computer, using saved-up change for the application fee. I'd never told anyone, especially not my mother. She'd called Stanford a fantasy for rich kids, and said chasing schools like that was how girls end up bitter and bankrupt. So I applied behind her back. I wrote my essay on the back of old homework while babysitting. I didn't even believe I'd get in. But now, I was in. Full scholarship, housing covered, a real shot. My chest filled with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. It lasted exactly 37 minutes, because when I opened the front door, my mother was waiting. She stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, her hand gripping a torn-open envelope with Stanford's logo. "You lied to me," she said. "You went behind my back." I tried to explain. It was free, it was merit-based, it was everything she used to say she wanted for me. She stared at me like I was filth. "You think you're better than me?" I didn't answer. Not out of disrespect, out of confusion. All these little certificates, these gold stars, you think they mean something? You're not special, Isla. You're just a girl who follows orders well. Don't confuse discipline with brilliance. That night, she called the program pretending to be me. She said I was struggling emotionally and not ready for the pressure. She withdrew my acceptance. The next day, my biology teacher pulled me aside. "They called to confirm your withdrawal," she said, "but the language didn't sound like you." I didn't say a word, I just nodded. That was the first time I wondered, not if my mom loved me, but if she wanted me small. The months that followed made it clear. Every award I won, she claimed it as proof of her good parenting. Every opportunity I earned, she blocked it for my own protection. If a relative praised me, she'd smile and say, "Well, you know, I'm the one who taught her everything." At first, I tried to earn her pride. I worked harder, stayed quieter, made myself smaller. But the better I did, the colder she got. It wasn't just about control. It was about competition. And when she realized I was pulling ahead, she reached for sabotage. That was the moment I stopped pretending. I wasn't misunderstood. I wasn't the black sheep. I was the threat. And she knew it. Because in her eyes, I saw something terrifying. Jealousy. It wore a mask of concern, but its hands were always pulling me backward. I didn't hate her, but I learned to stop trusting the smile that never reached her eyes. I was never the loud one in the family, never the favorite. I was the good girl, the quiet achiever, the one who knew better than to ask for more than she was given. Isla Whitmore. 17 when it all broke open, but it had started long before that. In our small town of Belridge, my mother was known as a force. People described her with admiration wrapped in fear. Dr. Lydia Whitmore raised 2 girls on her own after her husband left. That was the myth. The reality was different. She hadn't raised us. She'd ruled us. My older sister Clarice, 6 years my senior, had always been her echo. Pretty, polished, compliant. She got a business degree, married a man in insurance, had twins before 30. Clarice gave Mom everything she could boast about. And me? I gave her silence. I was the kid who read quietly in corners, fixed broken electronics in the garage, and drew blueprints instead of birthday cards. I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to build things that worked better than our home ever did. My mother hated the idea. She said it was a man's field and that no decent company would hire a girl who looked like she belonged in a thrift store. Because I didn't wear dresses, I didn't wear mascara, I didn't try to be pleasant, I tried to be real. My hair was always pulled back in a bun, my nails short and uneven. I didn't try to be lovable, just useful. That apparently made me dangerous. We lived in a modest 2-story house that still held the tension of my father's absence. He left when I was 6. I barely remembered him, but my mother told the story often enough for it to feel etched in my bones. He couldn't handle strong women, except she never cried when she told it. She smiled. Like it was a badge of honor to be unbearable. Clarice believed every word. She copied our mother's tone, her posture, even her cruelty, especially toward me. "You're not tough," Clarice once said. "You're just emotionally stunted." I had no answer. That was the role I'd been assigned, to absorb without reacting, to outwork without outshining. I went to public school like everyone else in town, but I carried a secret. I was 2 years ahead in math, took college courses online at night, and kept a growing folder of blueprints and project plans under my bed. No one knew, not even my teachers. I didn't want recognition, I wanted freedom. And I knew that required silence. My mother only showed affection when it could be displayed. A photo at an awards ceremony, a quote in the local newspaper, a post on her Facebook page that read, "Proud of my girl, hard work runs in the family." But when the cameras were gone, so was her kindness. If I asked for anything, a lab kit, a summer class, even new graph paper, her answer was the same. "We don't have the luxury of indulging your little hobbies." She called my work hobbies, but worshipped Clarice home decor blog like it was scripture. I worked part-time at the hardware store down the street. The owner, Mr. Creighton, was an old Navy engineer who noticed me sketching designs between customers. He started letting me borrow broken tools to fix. "You've got hands that know," he said once. "That's rare." I wanted to cry. Not because of the compliment, but because he meant it. My mother never acknowledged my abilities. To her, I was only as valuable as the praise she could claim for herself. When I got a perfect score on the state math test, she said, "Well, I did make you study." When I won second place in a robotics competition, she said, "First would have been better." But if Clarice posted a recipe that got shared 100 times, my mother would host a brunch to celebrate. She once said, while sipping tea in a sunlit room, "Clarice has always known how to present herself. Isla could learn a thing or two." That was when I knew it wasn't about success. It was about visibility. And I had learned to disappear too well to be useful to her. I didn't have friends over. I didn't talk back. I stayed in the background. Until that day, the Stanford day, when I stepped out of the background and into something resembling light. That was the day my mother saw me, not as her daughter, but as her rival. From then on, things got colder, the smiles got tighter, the rules stricter. She monitored my emails. She accidentally deleted files from my laptop. She insisted on driving me to school, saying it was for safety, but I knew it was control. She even called my chemistry teacher once to say I was showing signs of emotional burnout. He pulled me aside, concerned. I lied to his face, told him I was fine. Because if he reported anything, she'd find a way to use it against me. That was the world I lived in, a world where my own mother became a quiet wall between me and my future. But I adapted. I learned to speak carefully, move quietly, and plan deeply. I started preparing for escape, not with luggage, but with knowledge. I built backup files, alternate email accounts, encrypted folders. I knew I couldn't run without a plan. Because I wasn't just escaping a home. I was escaping a system built on jealousy disguised as love, and that required strategy. By the time I turned 18, I had become fluent in code switching between obedience and resistance, between small talk and silent rebellion. I knew when to smile, when to nod, when to pretend I didn't hear the way my mother weaponized the word ungrateful. But in my mind, I was already gone. I had one plan, one school, one shot. West Coast Institute of Engineering and Design. Not Ivy, not traditional, but cutting edge, modern. Hidden behind its casual branding was one of the most competitive early entry programs for applied robotics in the country. They only accepted 30 students a year. I didn't tell my mother, not because I feared rejection, but because I feared she'd intercept it, like Stanford. So I lied. I told her I was applying to local community college. I staged fake drafts of boring essays, left them open on my screen. I even let her edit a fake application to a culinary program, something she'd approve of. In reality, I spent nights in the garage rebuilding old servo motors, filming a design prototype I had constructed from broken fans and reassembled circuit boards. My final project was a compact assistive device for people with limited mobility. I submitted the demo video, recommendation letters from Mr. Creighton and my calculus teacher, and my true personal essay. One I had written in the Notes app of my cracked phone during a graveyard shift. The day I got in, I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I just walked outside, sat on the curb with Pickle, the neighbor's one-eyed cat, and let the wind move around me. My acceptance letter said I had 2 months. The first month, I said nothing. I quietly began saving. I sold 3 of my old game consoles, did extra shifts at the store, and found a subreddit where strangers traded secondhand lab coats and textbook PDFs. My school counselor, Mrs. Bram, called me in one afternoon. She said the institute had sent verification requests. "It's impressive, Isla. Why didn't you tell anyone?" I looked her in the eye. I didn't think I was allowed to want it. She didn't ask what I meant, just nodded and said, "Let me know if you need anything," and for the first time, I felt seen. Then came the second month. My mother found out. I had printed a form for housing confirmation and left it in the laundry room by accident. When I came home, it was taped to my bedroom door with a note in red pen. "You have 2 days to explain this." I stood there, heart pounding. Not afraid, just tired. I knocked on her office door. She didn't look up from her laptop. "You lied to me," she said. "You planned this behind my back." I said nothing. "Do you think I'm stupid?" she asked. "Do you think I wouldn't find out?" Still, I said nothing, so she stood, slammed the folder shut, walked over until her face was inches from mine. "You're not ready," she said. "You're not built for that world. You think I don't know how it works? I've seen what happens to girls like you. Too proud, too awkward, too alone." Her voice cracked, just a little. "They'll eat you alive," and for a split second I saw it. Not anger, but fear. Not for me, for herself. Because if I left, if I succeeded, what would that make her? I didn't answer her, just turned, walked back to my room and began packing. She didn't stop me, not at first. But the night before I was due to leave, I came home from my last shift to find my laptop missing. My flash drives, my notebooks. Gone. I ran to the garage, the lights were on, there she was, sitting on a stool, my bag of electronics beside her, half of it disassembled. "Looking for these?" she said. "You don't get to just leave without consequences." I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I sat across from her and waited. 10 minutes passed in silence. Finally, she stood and walked out, muttering, "When you fail, don't come crawling back." I stayed up all night salvaging what I could. I rewired what was left, restored most of the files, backed them up to cloud drives. I didn't sleep. Just worked, like I'd always done. At dawn, I left. My bus ticket had been bought weeks in advance. The sun rose behind me as the station faded in the mirror. No send-off, no goodbye, just freedom. The school was everything I'd imagined. Students from 20 states, classes taught in labs that smelled like metal and voltage, professors who didn't blink when I used jargon. And slowly, I came back to life. I wore what I wanted. Oversized hoodies, oil-stained jeans. I joined the robotics team. My project was selected for a regional innovation grant. My mother never found out, because I never told her. I cut contact entirely, changed my number, removed her from my emergency contacts. Clarice sent a few emails, some laced with guilt, others with warnings. "Mom's not doing well. She says you're brainwashed. She's scared." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because what she feared wasn't my failure. It was my success without her. She'd built a world where I needed her to function, but now, without her, I was finally functioning, better than ever. And the more distance I put between us, the clearer it became. My mother had never prepared me for the world. She'd prepared the world to doubt me, but I refused to stay small. I grew anyway, quietly, relentlessly, and in the silence she left behind, I began building the future she tried to burn. By the end of my second semester, I'd made a quiet name for myself. Not loud, not flashy, but reliable. The kind of person who fixed a broken sensor before anyone else noticed. The one who always had spare lithium batteries, extra soldering wire, and a backup plan. My professors didn't compliment me much, but they didn't question me either. I liked it that way. I kept my circle small. Just 3 people. Deo, who lived across the hall and spoke in algorithms more than English. Divya, my roommate, who ran on espresso code. And Dr. Ames, the robotics lead, who saw through my silence and handed me keys to the lab without asking too many questions. I never mentioned my family. My past, my mother, I had erased those parts of myself, archived them like corrupt code I didn't want to risk running again. Then came the announcement. A national tech startup competition. 30 teams, 10 cities, one finalist from each region. The prize, funding, internship placement, and a full feature spotlight in Innovate magazine. Dr. Ames pulled me aside. You should enter. I blinked. Me? You've the prototype. You've been testing it for months. This is what it's for, Isla. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, from recognition. This was it, the launch pad, the thing I'd been quietly building toward. I said yes. For 3 weeks, I worked nonstop. I skipped meals, slept on lab benches. Theo helped optimize the circuit layout. Divya redrafted my pitch slides. Every part of the project was personal. My design, a modular assistive tech arm, low-cost, adaptable, and repairable using off-the-shelf parts. For kids like Milo, the boy from my old town who couldn't afford specialized gear. For people like me who had to build what they needed from scraps. The night before our regional demo, I stared at the mirror in the dorm bathroom. My eyes were hollow, but my spine was steady. I knew who I was now. I'd earned every inch of this. And then, the email came. Urgent. Request for verification of student behavior. It was from the competition committee. A forwarded letter. Anonymous tip. Accusations of misconduct. Plagiarism. Instability. Student may be manipulating others' work for credit, it said. History of emotional volatility. Questionable ethics. Request review before promotion to finalists round. My stomach turned. I knew those words, not the phrasing, the tone, the specific blend of concern and poison. I'd seen it before, on scholarship letters I never received, on rejection emails that blamed character concerns. I forwarded the email to Dr. Ames. Within minutes, he called me into his office. He didn't look angry, just disappointed. Do you know anything about this? I shook my head once. No, but I know who wrote it. He paused. Your mother? Yes. He exhaled. Do you have proof? I pulled out my phone. Voice messages from 2 years ago. One where she called me a disgrace. One where she warned me I'd embarrass myself trying to be something I wasn't. I showed him the pattern, how she always struck when I was close to something. He sat in silence for a while, then nodded. You don't need to prove anything to me, but we may need to document it in case it goes further. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of panic, but strategy. I wrote everything down. Dates, times, messages. I created a folder labeled containment. The next morning, I went to Campus IT and requested access logs to my school email. Someone had tried to reset my password 3 times from an IP address tied to my hometown. I added that screenshot to the folder. I wasn't afraid anymore, just focused. She wanted to shake me. She didn't realize I'd stopped breaking the day I walked out that door. I presented my project at the demo with a calm, clipped voice. No theatrics, just function. One judge cried when I showed the arm working, said his nephew could have used something like it. A week later, I was named finalist. My photo, grease-smudged lab coat, messy hair, was featured on the Innovate website. The article read, Student Engineer Builds Bridge Between Disability and Innovation. The comments were flooded with support. Except one, anonymous, of course. Don't trust everything you read. Some kids know how to fake good. I didn't reply. I didn't have to, because behind the scenes, I was preparing something else. My legal name had just been added to the school's protective contact list. Any future communications from my mother would be flagged and reported. Dr. Ames helped file a formal statement. It locked down my accounts. HR flagged her number, and I quietly, ruthlessly cut the last thread. The next day, I received a voicemail from Clarice. Mom says she saw your article. She's spiraling. Said you made her look small. I deleted it without listening to the rest. Because I knew the truth. I didn't make her look small. She did that herself. I was just no longer standing in her shadow. The conference center in San Francisco was glittering with quiet pressure. Rows of booths, cameras from tech blogs, industry scouts pretending not to judge with every question. But I felt steady, because this time the light was mine. I stood beside my display, my name printed in bold. Isla Whitmore, founder, Modular Assistive Solutions. People stopped by every few minutes, some curious, some skeptical, and just drawn by the clean lines of my prosthetic prototype. It moved with precision, like a second thought brought to life. A few investors asked questions. One judge, an MIT robotics lead, stood there a long time, his hand on his chin. "You built this from open source code?" he asked, "and spare parts?" I nodded. No university lab access, just persistence. He nodded slowly. "You don't see that much anymore." Cameras flashed. I stood beside my design and smiled with the quiet of someone who had already won by showing up. For once, I didn't think of her. But the silence never lasts, not with people like my mother. It happened during the media mixer, an event I almost skipped. One of the judges waved me over for a photo op. I was mid-step when I saw her. Red coat, lipstick like armor, clipboard in hand. She was talking to the press, laughing, gesturing. I froze. A journalist glanced at me, then at her. "Oh," he said. "You must be Isla. Your mother's been telling us all about your journey." I blinked. "My what?" "She said she mentored you through the early drafts, helped refine the mechanics, said she always knew you were gifted." My ears buzzed, blood roared in my head, but I kept my face still. "I see," I said. "Did she mention when she taught me how to disassemble old printers for motors? Or how to sneak into junkyards for aluminum brackets?" The journalist frowned. No. "Did she mention the time she called Stanford and said I was emotionally unfit for their program?" Silence. He stepped back. "I think I need to verify something." "Excuse me?" I nodded, turned away, and walked toward the side exit. Every step was heavy with restraint. I didn't want to explode. I wanted to outlast her. In the lobby, she found me. Of course she did. "You didn't answer my messages," she said. I turned slowly. Her eyes flickered. "Calculating." "You shouldn't be here," I said. "This isn't your stage." She smiled thinly. "It is now. They're calling me your guiding force. Isn't that poetic?" "You didn't guide me, you sabotaged me. I protected you," she snapped. "From illusions, from failure. And look where that brought you." "Here?" I asked. "In spite of you?" Her eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't even be standing if it weren't for my discipline, my sacrifices." "You mean the ones you weaponized every time I tried to grow?" "I gave you structure. You built a cage." She stepped closer. "What are you going to do, humiliate me? In front of all these people?" I shook my head. "No. You'll do that yourself. You always do." Then I turned and walked back into the hall. The camera crew was waiting. A small audience had gathered. They'd heard things, seen glimpses. Now they watched me like I was about to choose between two versions of myself. I took the mic from the host. "Thank you," I said. "This award, this project, it's not just about engineering, it's about reclamation." A pause. "When I was younger, I was taught that brilliance had to come through certain channels, that success required obedience first. I believed it for too long, until I learned that sometimes the hardest thing isn't proving your worth to the world, it's proving it to the people who should have believed in you from the start." I didn't name her. I didn't have to. My mother stood off stage, her smile fading as silence filled the room. I continued. "This prototype is dedicated to kids who feel like they have to shrink to survive, who have their ideas dismissed because they don't come from the right homes, the right names, or the right kind of encouragement. This is for them." Applause erupted, steady, then swelling. I stepped back, nodded once, and let the moment close around me like armor. That night, she sent me one message. "You made me look like the enemy." I didn't respond. The committee issued a statement the next day, clarifying her role. "We regret the confusion. Mr. Whitmore's design, development, and execution were independently verified. No third-party mentorship claims could be substantiated." She tried calling press contacts after that, claimed bias, claimed manipulation, but it didn't stick. Not this time. Because I had the data, the emails, the proof, the same silence she once used to control me. I turned it into a shield. She'd built a story where she was the architect of my life. I rewrote it, quietly, permanently. At the finalist dinner, the host introduced me with new language: a self-driven engineer, a builder of bridges, a student who chose resilience over resentment. As I took my seat, I caught sight of her leaving the hotel, alone, coat tight around her. No cameras this time, no applause. That was the twist. She thought she could hijack my moment. But I didn't fight. I just told the truth and let the silence do the rest. She didn't stop, not really. A few days after the finalist dinner, I started getting emails from media outlets. A few hinted that they'd received concerned messages about me. Nothing specific, just vague suggestions that I had overstated my role in the design. Some tried to be polite about it, others didn't bother. One journalist from a small regional tech blog emailed, "We were told your mother had co-developed the prototype. Can you confirm?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The committee had already released their statement. The footage of the expo, the design logs, the time-stamped build videos, they were public, transparent. But I still felt the air change around me, the way it does when a storm hasn't passed, just moved somewhere else. I started documenting again, quietly. Every message, every call, every mention of her name linked to mine. I archived them all. I refused to be caught off guard again. That was the difference now. I didn't live in fear. I lived in preparation. And that shift, it made all the difference. The week after I got home, she showed up at my apartment building. She didn't call ahead, didn't even knock on the door, just waited in the lobby until a neighbor let her in. I opened my front door to find her standing there, eyes sharp, arms crossed. "You embarrass me," she said. I didn't flinch. "You did that yourself. You think you're above me now, just because you got some prize?" "No, because I earned something without taking anything from anyone." Her nostrils flared. "You wouldn't even exist if it weren't for me. And yet," I said, "you spent most of my life trying to erase me." Her mouth opened, then closed. I didn't step aside to let her in. We stood in silence. I let it hang there, uncomfortable, unrelenting. She wasn't used to that. She was used to yelling or ignoring or rewriting, not this, not being held in place by the truth. "You always think the worst of me," she said. "No," I said. "I think the most accurate version of you. That's worse." She blinked. For the first time in years, I saw it, a flicker. Not guilt, not sadness, just the realization that her methods no longer worked. I didn't fight, I didn't scream, I just reflected. Like a mirror held up too long. "I came to tell you," she said, "that I'm writing a book about parenting gifted children." Of course she was. "Good luck," I said. "Don't forget the chapter on sabotage." Her face hardened. She left without another word. I closed the door. Then I locked it, and I stood there for a long moment, hand on the frame. Not because I was afraid, but because I was finally safe. Not from her, but from needing anything she couldn't give. That was the real freedom. In the months that followed, I stopped asking why she was the way she was. I stopped hoping she'd wake up one day and become someone different. I built my boundaries like architecture, measured, reinforced, real. I limited contact. I changed my number. I made sure anyone close to me knew the story, not to gossip, but to prevent her from re-entering through the side door of sympathy. Some relatives pushed back. "She's your mother," they said. "She's hurting." And, I asked, does pain excuse cruelty? Does relation demand forgiveness? They didn't have answers, but I did. I didn't hate her. I didn't need to. That would still give her power. What I chose instead was indifference with compassion. I wished her peace, from a distance. I turned my focus to the project. The prototype had gained traction online. A disability advocacy nonprofit reached out. Then a university lab offered to partner on a new version. I formed an LLC, not to chase fame, but to protect what I'd built from anyone who might try to claim it, my mother included. I hired a lawyer, filed for patents, registered everything in my name. Every decision was a declaration. I exist. I created this. I'm not hiding anymore. That year, I was invited back to the same conference as a keynote speaker. I stood on that same stage, this time looking out into a crowd that wanted to learn, not just applaud. I spoke about creativity under pressure, about building from silence, about how sometimes surviving someone's jealousy is harder than surviving their absence. I ended the talk with a line I hadn't planned. Forgiveness isn't about letting people back in. Sometimes it's about letting yourself leave and locking the door behind you. Afterward, a girl came up to me, maybe 16, glasses too big for her face. She didn't say much, just handed me a note. I opened it later. It read, "Thank you, I thought I was crazy. Now I think maybe I'm just growing." I kept that note, still have it. Because that's the thing about breaking cycles. You don't always see the change right away, but someone else does, and that ripple, that's the work. My mother still sends letters. I don't open them. I don't need to. I already know what they say. Guilt wrapped in grammar, regret disguised as reflection. But that's not my story anymore. My story is the one I write on grant applications and research proposals. It's in the minds of students I mentor, in the words I share at panels, in the silence I leave when someone asks about my family and I just smile. One day, I'll tell it all. Maybe in a book, maybe in code, maybe in the eyes of a girl who thinks she's too much for the world she came from. I'll remind her she's not too much. She was just born into a room too small for her light, and that now she gets to build the next one. They say your mother is your first home, but what if that home has no windows, no doors? What if it's a place you spend your whole life trying to escape without knowing why it suffocates you? I didn't realize it at 17, not fully, but I felt it in every moment I hesitated to speak too loudly, dream too boldly, grow too brightly. Because every time I did, the walls pushed back. And those walls had my mother's voice. I used to think love meant sacrifice, shrinking so someone else could shine. But now, I know better. Love doesn't ask you to disappear. Love doesn't call your ambition arrogance. Love doesn't compete with your light, it reflects it. My mother wanted me small because it made her feel big. But I was never built to be tiny. I was never made to fit inside her shadow. I wasn't born to be a backup version of her unfinished dreams. I am my own design. I am not angry anymore, not bitter. What I am is free from needing her to understand, free from the story she tried to write for me, free from the apology I'll never get. I don't need it. I have something better, a life that is mine, a voice that no one edits, a future shaped by choice, not guilt. If you're listening, if you've ever questioned whether your parent was cheering for you or competing with you, know this: it wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. And your success, it doesn't make you cruel, it makes you strong. They may have given you life, but they don't get to define it. You do. So speak louder. Dream bigger, step fully into the space they tried to contain. You were never too much, you were just too real for someone still pretending. You don't owe them your silence. You owe yourself the whole sky.